Nelson Mandela was also in a very similar situation. I think it's very important for Belizeans to realize that you, along with Lee Richardson, in the context of Belizean politics, were in fact our first political prisoners.
No, there's no such thing on the Belizean law as political prisoners.
Political prisoners, obviously. You used the last edition.
The term in those days were they were sentenced to hard labor. And you did hard labor in those days, you know. You had to carry sacks of rice, flour, beans. You had to, when I stayed in the prison, you had to scrub floors, clean toilets, and things like that.
The exact same provision exists in a former British protectorate,
That's
which
right.
is South Africa.
Yes.
So how did the chips fall? I mean, on one side we had George Price and Nicholas Pallard, and on the other side we had Lee Richardson and yourself, yet you were all under the same umbrella of the PUP, of which Mr. Richardson was the leader. Isn't that right?
For two reasons. The union, the General Workers Union, was linked with the party. Up to the time of the general election in 1954, Lee Richardson, Herman Jex, and myself were officers of the union. After the elections, and in 1955 it became, the quasi-ministerial system was set up, and Lee became member for natural resources, Jex became member for public utilities, and I became member for social services. At first, labor was not in anybody's portfolio, and this was kept by the colonial secretary. But the workers were very dissatisfied because here is a party that was linked to the labor movement, which was now elected to office, yet nothing was happening. And the reason nothing was happening was because this Englishman held the portfolio of labor. So we had to pressure him, threaten to resign if he did not hand over labor to one of us. And so it was handed over to me. But he demanded I should resign from the trade union movement, which both Lee and I did. Jex remained there. There were then increasing tension within the trade union movement. Nicholas Pallard and Herman Jex was president of the union, were quarreling. Jex did not like the way Pallard was handling the funds of the union or handling the workers' money, credit hand and so on. And there was all this complaints and agitation. Price and Pallard then teamed up and began to attack the government. Price was deputy member, I was used to be called associate member to Lee Richardson. But he did not work at a desk in the ministry, and in fact did no work in the ministry. But he would occasionally go in, saying that he was going through the files just to see what was going on. It was only later on we discovered that the reason he was going through the files was to get material to hand to Pallard so that Pallard could then attack us from the rostrum. And sometimes the policies that were developing, very confidential matters and so on, were mentioned by Pallard on the rostrum and denounced by him even before they could develop into policies.
But at this time, all of you
were in the same party.
Member of the same party.
Same party. And so what was happening, Price and Pallard were striking at the government, which at least Price was a part. And this created tremendous tensions. But another problem was the developing situation in Guatemala. Price was supporting Guatemalan pretensions to Belize. Lee Richardson was supporting federation with the West Indies.
Well, weren't you all discussing the Guatemalan issue within the ranks of the party at the time? And wasn't there a general consensus as to how the party would deal with this issue of whether it would move towards Central American cooperation or towards joining the Federation?
Actually, there were not so much discussions. There ought to have been discussions, but Price's policy was to prevent any discussion about the Federation of West Indies. He would denounce any attempt to have anything to do with the West Indies.
Was he the leader at the time?
He was a secretary.
Still secretary.
Still
so
secretary.
why would his opinion against, say, Johnny Smith, the leader, and others,
well, you see,
matter so strong?
Johnny Smith at this time had gone.
Okay.
Because when we went to prison, he was Price at a meeting that they had at Thistle Hall. Price had suggested that the way to deal with the colonial authorities was to get help from the Guatemalans. And Johnny Smith made a statement there that he would not support Guatemalan claim directly or indirectly. As a result, George Price hassled him so much, harassed him so much. You know, he got people to heckle him in the streets and things like that and so on. And so Johnny Smith eventually resigned as leader of the party and eventually went to live abroad, where he's still living. I know he went into exile. It was only the first number of politicians that Price sent into exile in the years that followed.
Because Lee Richardson eventually
went too.
There's talk of some trips that were taken to Guatemala in the early days, and some of the support supposedly that was given by certain elements in Guatemala to the People's United Party in those days. What was the position of yourself and others, this support that was given, if it was in fact given?
No, frankly speaking, I don't know personally of any support that was given, although there are indications that there was some kind of support. I think it was in 1950 or thereabout that George Price told me that he had arranged for me to visit Guatemala. And I went. He made all the arrangements and I went. Now, while there, I displayed the People's United Party flag. I also made comments indicating that Belize was fighting for its independence and that one day we would have our own flag as a nation, and words to that effect. I mentioned that we were fighting against colonialism.
I'm still at the point where you were working in the People's United Party. You had taken this trip to Guatemala, and were there any offers made to you in this trip?
None.
Did you run into anything that would give you the impression that there were a sort of covert activity going on between members of the People's United Party and elements within Guatemala?
No, and you see, in those early days of politics, it would have to be very direct for me to realize it. I must say, looking back, that we were pretty naive in those days. I think at that time, apart from my trip to Jamaica to consult Norman Manley, I had never been out of the country. We were learning politics, we were discovering things which we never imagined existed. We were concentrated on fighting the British. And but certainly nothing was said to me directly, so that I could understand that the Guatemalans were inclined to want to put money into the fight or whatnot. I'm not saying that there was not that element, but if it was, I at the time did not know of it.
We know that around that time, as you already said earlier, the big difference was the move towards Guatemala, appeasing Guatemala, as compared to Lee Richardson and others who felt that Belize at the time, British Honduras, should come into federation with the West Indies.
Yes.
Was there any racial overtone to this idea of wanting to be more with the Caribbean than with Central America?
Yes, I believe so, because George Price used to say open on the rostrum that what Richardson wanted was to flood the country with more black people, you see. And there were always accusations about large numbers of Jamaicans. You know, rumors being spread that the large number of Jamaicans would be coming into the country, you know, things like that. So definitely, in those days, Price was against the university, Belize participating in the University of the West Indies. And he once told us that the reason he was against it is because our students would go there, would meet with other West Indian, with students from other West Indian countries, and that later on these students would become leaders in their respective countries, and this would more easily draw Belizeans into the West Indies Federation or some kind of association with the West Indies. I was quasi-minister for education at the time, and the pressure was being put on me not to pay any contribution to University of West Indies or send any representative to the Senate, I think it was, of the university. But I paid no attention to this. I insisted that we should contribute to the West Indies, we should send our students there. And later on, a priest, an American priest, was sent to represent Belize on the Senate. And I strongly criticized this in the House. I said that, and this was done without consultation with me, and I strongly criticized it, and eventually it was changed. So that we had that difference. I personally was not in favor of Belize joining the Federation of West Indies immediately. I felt that though we should examine it as an option, I felt that Belize should not enter into any association before it got independence. That we should get independence first, that we should experience our independence for a period, and then if we thought it was in our interest, then we should go into federation or whatever, any other association we want.
So at that period, there was a discussion about independence, strong discussion.
Harrison Courtney used to hold public discussions on independence. In the party, in the PUP itself, you could not have discussions because Price denounced any discussion of independence as trying to trap the people into independence. In fact, there was not to be any activity connected with the Caribbean at all. I'll give you one example. One of our trade union leaders was Albert Arzu from Stan Creek. He had gone to Barbados to do attend some workshops. When he came back, he was invited by the extramural department